All y'all beer fans out there, we have a special edition of Spatchcock Nation, the talk show version of Spatchcock Funk. And we're joined by one of the greatest brands, in fact, the guardian angel brand of the craft brewing industry. All right, so these are people that, as an organization, the Boston Beer Company has helped grow and support this industry across the board, as well as make some super dynamite knockout products. And today we've got a special treat. We're going to be doing a tasting with three of the coolest people from that company with different areas of expertise. We have one of their master brewers, a really clever dude that invented their New England IPA product. We've got Tim Fadden, that's Rich Farrell. He's going to be the guy that's going to be leading us through the tasting. We have the great Tim Fadden, someone that's been a friend of the show for a long time, who's a region manager and has been really opening markets and bringing this type of activity, the craft brewing communities together, and by using Sam Adams as a way to do so. And we have Matt Parizzelli, who is a product trainer and a director of taste. He's got style too. You can look at his only person I know in quarantine that's got a fresh do like that. He looks good.
A little bit of flow.
It's beautiful, baby. That's the type of flow you want to have. So we mentioned Sam Adams being the guardian angel of the craft brewing industry, and it's been true. It's a brand that's connected to a lot of people in a lot of different ways and introduce other products. But today, it's all about the beer. So, Rich, you've been known all around the place, coming from different breweries across the country, as kind of a rising rock star, and that's pretty fitting considering you've got two guitars in the back of your room there. Tell us a little bit about. Well, first, before we get into the tasting, a lot of people are talking about Galaxy hops. What are Galaxy hops all about? What do they mean?
So Galaxy, I mean, besides and most importantly, I think they're my favorite hop, which is how it's easy to get into a little bit of trouble by just using something too much. But what Galaxy really does is it brings this really kind of focused red fruit. To me, it's always like this kind of like red fruit roll up almost, or like a Jolly Rancher. It has those kind of things to it, which is really unique for a hop. And hops that have that profile tend to come from Southern Hemisphere, especially Australia and New Zealand, which means the acreage is pretty limited and that terroir is pretty rare in the world. So there's only so much of these hops that you can really grow. And one of the cool things about coming to Sam Adams is I was like working on this New England IPA and I was like, oh man, we really need to use this hop in this beer. And then we kind of did the math and worked it up and we're like, oh, we would have to essentially buy all of this hop in order to make this beer, everything that was available. And, you know, we just were able to think about like what the effect would be on the rest of the industry. And the decisions that we tend to make around those are like, what's the right ingredient for the beer, but also what's the right ingredient choice for the industry, and how do we help every, you know, kind of like the rising tide, bringing all ships up, and not kind of trying to outcompete people for the sake of outcompeting people.
So one of the things too, when we found about you online, Rich, when we were Google searching you, and we didn't have to search in incognito, there were nothing nefarious out there. Your background is in organic chemistry. And I mentioned Tim, knowing him a long time and just having met Matt a few times. It's this great chemistry that people kind of bond over Sam Adams products. With your chemistry background, what do the Galaxy hops do from a chemical standpoint, an organic chemistry standpoint versus your traditional hops?
Well, so hops are incredibly, and I appreciate the compliment because I actually went to school for history. So but I do know a little bit about hop chemistry. But what I can tell you is hops are super, super complex. They're all kind, and you guys have probably heard about this, like different cannabis research has been in the news lately with terpenes. Everybody's talking about terpenes now. Hops are loaded with terpenes. But the chemistry of a hop is really, really complex. It has to do with the genetics of the hop. It has to do with the region it's grown in, and we call that the terroir. So you can grow the same hop in Germany and in the US and in Australia. That hop's going to be completely different in each of those terroirs because the terroir has an influence on the DNA, which then has an influence on what we perceive as the taste or the flavor or the aroma. So that Galaxy hop, for example, is only going to really taste and smell that way when it comes from Australia, when it's grown there. And people have had all kinds of great ideas. Well, if the acreage in Germany in the Hallertau, for example, for our Boston lager, or if the acreage in Australia is limited, why don't we just grow them somewhere else? And it doesn't work because, again, that organic chemistry, as you mentioned, is such a complex interplay between terroir, genetics, and all kinds of other environmental factors.
Awesome. I'm already learning a lot. So you know what? The best thing I like to do while I'm learning is drink. So tell us about Sam Summer, and let's get into this. And for our viewers at home, just make sure you have a bottle of Sam Adams and a pint glass. Let's hear it, brother.
So this is Samuel Adams Summer Ale into Samuel Adams Perfect Pint Glass. So I'm going to pour that here. A little bit of background on this beer, insofar as it needs a little bit of background. Everybody knows Sam Summer Ale. We've been brewing this since the 90s, a long time. It's still our biggest seasonal release in terms of volume, in terms of dollars, so it's a really important brand for us. And with any important brand, one really challenging thing is how do you kind of keep it fresh and keep it current for the market, because the market is going to continue to evolve and the beer stays the same. People's tastes change, and then how do you take like something that's kind of like an iconic recipe and start to mess around with it a little bit? And that was the challenge that we had a couple years ago. So we redeveloped this beer 2 years ago. The thing that we kept hearing from the market over and over again was versus the taste of the 90s, where people were looking for this really like kind of big all malt declaration of flavor. Nowadays, what we consider to be like sessionable beers and craft have kind of converged and are continuing to converge, and the things that people consider acceptable now in craft are different. And so people were saying we want it to be a little bit lighter, a little bit more sessionable, and we want the citrus to be more intense. Citrus says drinkability almost anywhere you use it. So what we did was we added a little bit of citrus complexity. We added some lime peel, we added some orange along with the lemon to bring some complexity, lighten the body a little bit, lowered the grains of paradise a little bit, which is that peppery note. And then we added whole lemons, like pureed lemons. And so what this does is it gives like this big kind of focused lemony whole fruit impression, almost like adding a little bit of lemonade to it. And that just brought the focus in, it brought the drinkability in, and everything else just kind of came together. So when you look at this, we'll do our 5-step appraisal. This is going to have what we call a veil in the beer industry. That's a slight haze that tells you that it's unfiltered. It tells you that a lot of the essential oils, a lot of the parts of that pureed lemon are still going to be floating around in your glass, giving you flavor and aroma. There should be a nice kind of soft head that hangs around for a long time. That's going to be the wheat in this beer. This is a wheat beer that goes back to the German Weizen tradition. That's going to have that nice rocky head from the wheat. In the aroma, you should get that big, big focused lemon. And hopefully underneath that lemon, there's this kind of nice blanket of the complexity of the peppers, which is the grains of paradise, and the lemon, orange, and lime peel. Cheers.
Yes.
Cheers.
Awesome.
Hey, Rich, if you don't mind, I want to kind of just ask a question too, because we've been talking about kind of reformulating our seasonals across the board, and I know there was some slight changes made to Cold Snap. I don't know if you could maybe speak to that a little bit, because I know there's a lot of fans of Cold Snap out there, and we actually had a really good year with Cold Snap.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it resonated very well. But just for the fans of Cold Snap, maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no problem. And Cold Snap is another one that's like an important brand for us. It's one that I think like, if the market's not changing around it, the beer itself is just so sound. It's like so well constructed. And with Cold Snap especially, it was like, how do you take something that is pretty much perfect speaking as a brewer? This thing is like, the recipe is just so tight. There's really no way, like, how can I make it better, right? Like, how can my team make it better? And again, it wasn't so much taking the beer and changing it for the sake of changing it. It's like, what are drinkers telling us? And so like one way that like a brewer can exist, and a lot of brewers exist this way pretty successfully, is like, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to brew, and that's all I'm going to brew. And if you like it, you can come to my brewery. And if you don't, I don't care. The way that Sam, we do some of that, but Sam usually tries to meet drinkers where they are. And so when drinkers are telling us, hey, we love Cold Snap, but it would be nice if, I wanted to drink 3 or 4 instead of just 2 or 3. It's like, how do we get that repeat purchase one more time? And the thing that we were hearing back from everybody we talked to is, it'd be nice if the orange was a little bit higher, and nice if the vanilla was a little bit higher. These are nostalgic flavors: orange, vanilla, creamsicle, citrus, nostalgic flavors. Right now, we're seeing a lot of kind of uptick in these nostalgic flavors driving drinker preference. And so that's kind of what we did with Cold Snap, similar to what we did with Summer Ale. Lighten the body up, make people want to go for that one extra in a session, and also just bring up those kind of like warm, nostalgic, kind of comfort flavors and aromas, and but keep the complexity where it is.
Rich, that's an awesome question and a great answer. It made me think about something else that comes to mind a lot, at least around my family and the crew of people that I roll with. To me, I can always tell that spring's coming and it's finally going to be a nice time of year when I start seeing Summer Ale in the fridge. And the same thing, like Oktoberfest, Sam Oktoberfest is maybe the most baller Oktoberfest that I've ever had, and I've had quite a few Oktoberfests, as my body shape can attest to. What do you do about, like, so these brands, like you talked about Summer and Oktoberfest, these are stalwarts in the industry, and you guys get that feedback, but how do you determine when to say, yeah, people want more vanilla or more sours, but this is really what we should do? How do you make that decision?
It's a boxing match, man. It's like, usually, and with any company like ours or any kind of brewer that kind of sits where we do, we've got a lot of people that are going to have opinions about that stuff. So we got the sales force, and that's like the most important thing. It's like, if the sales force isn't behind it, it's not going to get sold, right? So we got to get the sales force behind it. Then we got to get the brand team, which is marketing, behind it. And then we got to get the brewers behind it. And the brewers can be a bunch of stubborn people, men and women, like we're stubborn, right? So getting all those together is sort of like step one. And when all those things come together is when it goes forward. So I bet there were parts of the organization that a couple years ago were like starting to think, hey, maybe we should consider changing Summer Ale. But like at the time, everyone was like, oh, no, like we couldn't possibly do that. But then once the idea is there, it kind of starts to make sense. And then again, once we got far enough down that path where we were starting to run like focus groups and like ask people what they thought and bring people to the brewery. We have about 250,000 people come to our brewery every year in Massachusetts and Boston to take the tour. And we get their opinions as they come through there. And they were kind of saying loud and clear, like, now's the time, like we're ready. So again, we can kind of like go back and forth as an organization, but then when the drinkers start to say, let's go, that's when we usually go for it.
I think
Awesome.
I think too with that is you can get a large amount of information quickly, just with all the kind of different platforms that you can use from a focus group perspective. So that's a kind of a cool thing to think about, because we're a company that's always kind of adjusted pretty quickly on the fly. And I've been here 12 years, and Rich is right. Whenever you say anything like, hey, we're thinking about changing Summer Ale, everybody's like, whoa, it's a tough thing to make a decision on, but it turned out to be the right thing, and the brewers and you guys just did an awesome job. But I will say, because this is going to come up, you're not changing Oktoberfest, right?
No.
Nothing's changed. Because that's probably the number one question I get is like, don't change Oktoberfest. So
Yeah, I would be. I mean, this is like my favorite beer brand, and I mean, I wouldn't walk away from it. You know what the thing is? I'm like, they better not change it. And then I would taste the new one and be like, oh shit, this is like the best Oktoberfest ever. So for Tim and Matt, when you guys have to like relay that information, either because you're the major channel and the information pipeline for the brewers and vice versa. How do you guys deal with people that are like, hey, we've got a new version of Sam Adams coming? How do people respond to that? How do you guys manage that back and forth?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll take it up front, and I'll pass it to you, Tim. Back to what Rich was saying. There's people that have been drinking Summer Ale religiously since the mid '90s. So there's going to be some shock and awe when you roll that out. Whether in my case, I'm in front of a group of wholesalers or retailers, or if we're talking to our sales organization, right? There's going to be a certain segment of people that are just initially taken back by it because they love the beer. And we sell a lot of Summer Ale, as Rich said. But we come at it from exactly basically what Rich said was, hey, we are trying to meet the drinker. And we're coming with a drinker demand here that's not just seen in beer. I mean, this is an unstoppable wave here of people who are looking for easy drinking options, period. And you take a look at what's happened with seltzer. A segment that didn't exist essentially 5 years ago and now is taking over the entire industry. And why? Easy drinking, sessionable. It's got the calorie and sugar levels that people find very appealing. And so I think we come at it from that perspective. And at the end of the day, listen, you put it in front of them. Tell me if this sucks, right? And we don't get that a whole lot of the time. So, and then after that, we see what happens in the market. Because you have some B-sides. There's no doubt about it. We're not gonna hit a home run every single time. Just so happens with Cold Snap and with Summer Ale, we did to a certain extent. This was right in line with drinker expectations, I think, for 2019, 2020.
Yeah, and I would say that from getting the wholesalers on board, which is our number one responsibility, is exactly what Matt said. Let them taste the product, right? So if they taste the product, they're gonna like it. we're fortunate because we have some built-in credibility too. So we walk into a wholesaler and we mean a lot to their portfolios. So they're going to give us the benefit of the doubt that, the brewers, and we're making the right decisions. And, to Matt's point, we've made some mistakes. Everybody has. Everybody in the organization makes mistakes, but when it comes to the beer, I think everybody puts their best foot forward and make sure that we have the right product for the customers. So, I think you're going to see more of it. I really do, because of basically what I just said before, and just the ever shifting demand from the drinker, the feedback, and just the I guess the close proximity we are to the drinker now through several different kind of platforms. It's really a cool place to be. And, with people like Rich on board and the creativity, I mean, the sky's the limit moving forward.
Well, before we go into the next beer, because I'm dying to try it, though, I'm really excited about this one that's going by pretty fast. I'm excited, as I know the people that are going to listen to this are excited too, is you've got 4 people on this phone that very much love beer, and 3 of them are experts. But you mentioned earlier too about the introduction of the seltzer product, right? And the Truly product, to me, one, because Sam has made good products, Boston Beer Company makes good products. It was trusted in its entrance into the space. And now people like me, I drink a lot of liquor, will dabble with it now as a mixer in different ways to play with things. But your guys have a really great reputation of speed to market while still delivering high quality products. Like iPhones are really great devices, but one of their keys has been, we're going to release it before it's totally perfect, and then we'll issue a new release very quickly afterwards. But you can't do that with beer. So how are you guys able to, or how do you see that actually flexibility work to your advantage? I mean, how does that work in the industry in terms of, from all 3 of your different viewpoints?
I mean, I'll just say, from my viewpoint, you're absolutely right. I think I might be misquoting this, but Jim, says we're a big company. Well, we're small enough to be able to make quick decisions, where we need to. There's some brands that we've launched with like all sorts of land speed records, and it's pretty incredible from concept to final product to marketing to getting it to the trade. And again, part of that is, we've got this credibility with wholesalers because of the support we've given over the years and the success that we've had, that, they give us, again, they benefit of the doubt. So like, hey, we've got this new product, you don't really have a problem, getting an initial order as long as you have some things buttoned up and you have some places you can sell it. So that's part of it. But, I think the flexibility, all comes down to the fact that we have a pretty close-knit organization and everybody kind of talks. And I think we respect each other's opinions, but everybody's got a voice. And, if you don't have a voice in an organization, then, stuff like this can't happen.
Yeah, well, I'll add one more thing to that, and then I'll kick it over to Rich. But I think that there's one thing that you can definitely know that you're going to get when you pick up a Sam Adams beer. And let's just take Sam Adams, and that's a well-crafted quality beer. If it's not what you wanted to taste, or experience at that particular moment, that's fine. You drink a different beer, but the quality and the attention to detail while getting to market, fairly quickly with some of these new ideas, it's not overlooked. And as an example, this beer that we're drinking right now, 10 different people tried it before it hit the market. We had our sensory team try it. We had Rich, we had the brewing team try it. Jim Cook, it was in front of him. And we take all those steps before it hits market. And if any one of those people, raises a hand, back to the drawing board. It's time to brew a new batch, which is, I think, pretty remarkable. And it's that unwavering commitment to quality, which stands the test of time, I think. Rich, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's dead on. And like, I can speak for how we do R&D and how we do innovation. And it's true for what we call our Beyond Beer products, and that stuff like Truly or our beer products is, and I always go back to in my job interview with David Grinnell, who's our vice president of brewing and a very inspiring guy. One of the first things he said to me was, I expect you to fail. I expect you to fail early. And I expect you to learn from every failure, but I want you to fail, because if you're not failing, you're not taking risks. And if you're not taking risks, you're not truly innovating. And so what we do, like 98% of what we do at the JP Brewery never leaves those walls. are out and out failures a lot of the time, but as long as in each failure there was one little thing we can pick up and say, well, this part of it was successful, and then we put those pieces together until finally we've got something that's entirely successful. So for something like Summer Ale, you're drinking what's in that glass, which is the result of one brew, but there was 100 iterations of that theme before we got to that, and we did it quickly, and we did it with the input of people all over the organization, like Matt said. So it might look from the outside like we're dropping these sort of like really like kind of perfect the first time beers out there, but man, there's a lot of churning and a lot of bubbling and a lot of mistakes along the way. And I'm really lucky to have a really strong team of R&D brewers, and we've got a really strong team of R&D folks who work on Beyond Beer that basically get paid to fail with some grace.
Rich, that actually just gave me goosebumps. The idea. So to me, failure is the best inspiration of all. It's the greatest teacher. And coming from creative people, like to me, like obviously I like to, we have a cooking show, right? So we're creating stuff and trying stuff, and people will say, oh my gosh, we made this mac and cheese, which is actually a really good episode. But the process before that is littered with failure. Great creative people, like you're a musician, you're a brewer. The ones that are truly great, like there's so many songs that are sitting on like Method Man's floor or Bob Dylan's like Garbage Can that were like just to them trash, but that failure made it. And I love that you speak to that, because that speaks also to the American spirit, right? I think about like our homeboy Sam Adams and his cousin John and those guys brought it hard, and they had to fail a lot of times and risk a lot of things to get there. But that type of thing is great. And Matt, you touched on something too about the high quality and the craftsmanship of the product, right? So one of the things I actually was thinking about as we were planning for this, and we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks, and you guys have just been so great to have these back and forth with. Timmy was like, yo, go check this store out here. They're going to have the new Sam Adams New England IPA, which we'll get to sipping in a second, at the store. So I roll in there, and I know the guy because I happen to drink some beers. So we're talking, and I'm like, hey, so listen, I know you guys are just getting in new now some Sam Adams New England IPA. And a person in the store who I had never met before turned to me and he goes, Sam is dropping a new IPA. And I'm like, yeah, New England IPA. He's like, yo, Sam Nipa? And I'm like, yeah, man, you should pick some up, I guess. I mean, that's what they're having. But it spoke to the idea of the quality of the craftsmanship, because as we get into this beer, New England IPAs are, to me, they're very fun to drink. But depending on how many you're going to just go through and roll through, like the Sloop products, these things are all fun and different. But in honesty, you'll see 4 people with great taste be like, you know what, I don't like this one as much as that. So that's where that thing comes in. But it speaks to the craftsmanship. So to that end, Rich, can we jump into these IPAs, because I'm feeling it.
Yeah, absolutely. Here we go. This is Samuel Adams New England IPA. There we go. So New England IPA, and this is a style that, so like if I go off the rails, this is a style I've spent like a big chunk of the past 5 years thinking about. It really started in Sam Adams. It started like a lot of us kind of knew how to do this thing with beer, but a lot of us didn't know really why it happened. We knew that if we manipulated the malt and the hops this way, we got this result, and it was kind of revolutionary. And I would describe New England IPA as probably a once a decade realigning moment in beer history. In the first decade of the 2000s, it was West Coast IPA. In the second decade of the 2000s, it was hazy IPA. I think Sam Adams stands ready to help the conversation of what the realignment in the next decade of the 2000s is going to be, but this is the one that we have right now. And one thing that we were able to do over the past few years leading up to 2017 or 2018 when we released this beer was we went to town on the science of it. We did presentations at American Society of Brewing Chemists. We did real scientific research on what it is on a molecular level that's going on in this beer that makes it does what it does, which is deliver super, super, super nuanced and complex and booming hop character, soft mouthfeel, low bitterness. Like I said, hop chemistry is complex. And in this beer, nowhere is it more complex than in a New England style IPA, like what's going on a molecular level with the haze, with that hop aroma, which is an interplay between yeast and hops that don't exist independently, that only happens when you put them together in a certain way. So it's a really exciting style, and it's easy at this point, especially to just kind of write New England IPA off as, oh, it's just like another hazy brewery. It's just another brewery making more hazy beers. And I would argue that this is still a super fresh and super relevant platform to deliver just like the entire palette of what you can do with hops. So when you look at this, it's hazy. Obviously, people stopped calling them New England style IPAs in a lot of places and started calling them hazies. You shouldn't be able to see your hand through it. This beer is opaque because of the way that the hops and the proteins in the malt interact. And what they do is they form these double bonds, which you can't break. And that haze then forms what we call a permanent colloidal haze in the beer. And what that does is it catches all these nice little hop components that normally would fall out of or be filtered out of beer, and it keeps them in this kind of web-like matrix, right? And if it stays in suspension like that, you get it in your nose, you get it in your mouth, and it creates an altogether different drinking experience than another type of IPA or hoppy beer. So what you get in the nose, huge red fruit, tropical fruit, citrus, grapefruit. I mean, it's all in there. But the cool thing that the yeast does with the hops is it creates those big tropical notes and those big, really kind of focused red fruit notes. You'll notice that big kind of rocky head still hanging out up there. That's from all the wheat and oats in here that give it that kind of, it's like this big sating mouthfeel that helps with the head too. Cheers.
Yeah, for sure. When you're talking about that and the New England, I want to know about the naming of it, because to me too, I'm a big history guy, and like what we've talked about Sam Adams before. Tim and I have many times about the man himself. He's a brewer and a patriot, which is funny because that's true, right? But this dude was a rabble rouser, and the idea was that change was like, he was one of those people, like Jack Welch once said, change before you have to. And that idea, of course, permeated across New England and then across the East Coast, and then now it still permeates in our great country. So I love that captures that spirit. So before we hear how these guys discuss it with the people, tell us more about like what made the naming come out. Like, what's the history behind? Was it unique to New England? Like, how does that all play into things?
You mean for like New England style IPA and why it's called? Yeah. So it was, for a long time, and I would say starting in the mid 90s and all the way through the early 2000s, West Coast IPA kind of reigning supreme. These bitter, dry IPAs, all of the San Diego breweries kind of kicked that off. And the New England breweries were kind of like working very quietly, and at first, just mostly in brew pubs, and the only place you could get these styles as they started to emerge was at these little off the beaten path brew pubs in Vermont. So not very many people really knew about them. And the people that did, it was like a religion. And so this is like going back to Vermont Pub and Brewery. Greg Noonan was one of the first to use the yeast that we now consider kind of fundamental to the style. It's an English style ale yeast. And then he traded around with his friends around Vermont, and then they all started brewing the style, and then it got out to homebrewers. And when it got in the hands of homebrewers, that's when things went off the rail in kind of a good way, because homebrewers are completely willing to do stuff that a trained brewer would be horrified by. They're like, well, I'll just do this. But like, if you're trained, you'd be like, that's a horrible idea and you shouldn't. But what that kind of iterative experimentation by people who are not trained in the brewer's art, it just like flung open the doors of what we consider okay to do in a beer. Like the haze used to be, this wasn't acceptable. Crystal clear beer was considered quality beer. And in a lot of our beers, we still think that way, but this turned that on its head. This turned the way that you manipulate hops and malt on its head. And once it got into the hands of homebrewers and the internet stepped in, and then like Instagram stepped in, and these look really good with an Instagram filter, it just kind of took off from there. This is a really good example of the first kind of convergence of social media and a beer style is the New England IPA. They helped each other to the point where this is like probably the most photographed beer style ever now. That's kind of how it got out. And then people in Massachusetts started doing it, and people in Maine started doing it. And it's rippled out from there, but you have to credit those original kind of brew pub guys up in Vermont, and then it getting out to the homebrewing community, and the homebrewers just like joyfully breaking all the rules and then handing it back to the professional brewers and us being like, you did what? And now it seems normal. But I remember the first time I started to hear about some of these techniques, my mind was blown.
Rich, that thing, right? I mean, you just hit like 5 points that are awesome. One, the West Coast, East Coast thing, and I'm not talking about like Biggie, Tupac, and those guys, though. We do have some opinions on that. The West Coast style versus what then the East Coast style was kind of a more juicy approach. I remember when it was first being talked about, juicy was what kept getting pushed on people's throats. And at first I was like, and I was still kind of experimenting with IPAs. I wasn't madly in love with them yet, but then the juicy approach came in, and not just because it's named after a great Biggie song, but that flavor to it was great. But the home brewing thing, the reason why I'm so glad you brought that up, because right now that's an important aspect of all that we do, especially right now while we're stuck inside. People are doing that. But we want to encourage people that are home brewers, like, you want to become the next Rich. You want to become someone like Jim Cook. And those people all started by doing stuff in their garage. Sam Adams, during Prohibition, I mean, he wasn't during Prohibition, but I mean, during all these different parts of our country's history, but brewing especially is something that started in people's houses. And I love that you incorporated that in there. So for Tim and Matt, how do you guys relate some of the great knowledge that Rich has to home brewers? Because I bet a lot of times you're like, well, I make my own beer and it's probably not that good, but like, how do you encourage them to both be experimental as a home brewer and then also, recognize that Sam Adams is someone who might be a good fit for them?
Sure. Well, I mean, I can speak in my perspective as a trainer, as a product educator. I mean, most of what I try to do is listen to Rich and then regurgitate it and pawn it off as my own. So that's really what I do first and foremost from a technical perspective and a brewing perspective. But the great thing is, so many people are brewing at home now. The culture is insane. Everybody wants to talk about beer. Everyone wants to seek out new styles of beer. So as Rich said, when this, New England style, hazy, juicy style of IPA really took off, it took the entire industry by storm, because everyone just had to have it. Everyone had to try it, talk about it, post about it. And so it's a familiar style now. And I love it so much because it's such an inviting beer, and it's an inviting IPA. And what I mean is, IPA year over year, right, is the #1 style in craft beer. But it still alienates an awful lot of people who run from hops and have an idea that, an IPA has to be this tongue scorching, stay away from buffalo wings, don't go there, it'll set your mouth on fire type of deal. And I love hearing people say that when we're about to taste this beer, because I just say, hold on a second. You're not an IPA fan. I get that. Try this. And all of a sudden they have this explosion of hop aromatics and hop flavor with no bitterness. And it's kind of mind altering, I think, for the drinker that doesn't drink IPAs. And, for a home brewer, like Rich said, I mean, it's a dream to experiment with different methods and different procedures like this and come up with a beer that just explodes with hop flavor, but doesn't really, scorch your tongue before you take another sip.
Yeah, and I just say from a sales perspective, and Matt was in sales before he got into the product education piece, and I know that when we first talked about launching this brand, it was probably one of the most exciting things that we have done in a long time. Primarily because we saw like what other companies were doing, what other brands were doing. And the exciting part for me and for us was that once we get our hands on what we're going to make, we knew it was going to be the best of the best. And it's exactly what it is, because it meets all the criteria that we expect out of our beers. It's, even to Rich's point when we were talking about the seasonals, I mean, you can have a couple of these beers and enjoy yourself
right now.
Without getting, knocked on your can. But it's also the tremendous amount of flavor in it. And there's just nothing you can say bad about this product. That's what's probably the most exciting thing for us. And, the fact that, we're a company that's big enough to make it to scale, right? So we can make enough of it and work on the stabilization on the shelf and other things like that is also a benefit to us, in that respect. So, this category, like as Matt said, the IPAs continue to grow. And I think you've seen IPAs kind of go into subsets over the years, the grapefruit a couple of years ago. And this is the one that's going now. And this one's been going a while and I don't see it going anywhere. So I would, I think you're going to see different iterations of this style before you kind of see the new and upcoming IPA style. Maybe Rich doesn't agree with that, but I think this style is here to stay.
Well, Matt, I'll say one more thing about that too. With this style, is that we, in terms of stepping in to something that is ready to take off. I mean, I don't know if we've ever been more excited than we were about this, because, I mean, listen, we were born in Boston. This is a New England IPA. This is something we live and breathe and can really put our stamp on. So to say New England IPA and put that on a package that says Samuel Adams right underneath it, I mean, that just makes sense. It makes sense to drinkers. It makes sense to wholesalers, to bar owners, right on down the line. So, we were all about it. And to have somebody like Rich, that knows the style inside and out, it's a perfect combination.
I love that you guys are talking about the trend. So what we're going to do now is we're going to segue into, we're going to do like a 4-way around the horn style thing where I'm going to ask you guys questions. And the first one actually we'll go with is going to be about what trends do you see coming in the beer industry? Because actually Timmy Fadden at one point, and I know that Sam does this, which is also awesome about the people that work there and the organization itself, that people that are in the sales force around the organization will all make beers, and then all of a sudden they'll pick one that becomes a release. And when Tim was doing that, we were playing softball. He lived a few blocks from where I'm actually sitting right now, and he made a Fight the Goat coconut porter, and it was really good. I enjoyed it quite a bit, and it was before coconut porter became a thing, and now coconut porter is everywhere, and it's awesome. So what we'll do is we'll go Timmy, and then Matt, and then Rich. What are some of the trends that you guys, what do you think is the next big thing in craft beer?
I mean, I think we're talking the beer industry. I think you're going to see, the seltzer segment is going to continue to just thrive, and I think you're going to see some different things like that. We just recently launched the Truly Lemonade, which has taken off. That's a whole new wave of drinkers. That, I mean, I think the household penetration is very low on that, so there's a ton of run room for that segment. As far as the beer segment, I'm very excited about where we stand, from the beer segment, because our seasonal business is stabilizing. It's strong, and we just have such a good following. And obviously, going through this whole situation, you kind of see people are picking up trusted brands, and I think we're benefiting from that because, we've always been here, right? And everybody's tried our beers and they like them. So that, I think, is going to create, so hopefully some longevity for our growth. And then, we've got a vast portfolio. So I'm excited about all of the segments of our products. So we got Twisted Tea, which continues to grow double digits for, I don't know, it's 15, 16 years straight. I think the trick is, how do we figure out who each one of these drinkers is and do the things that Rich was talking about before and just kind of modify our approach to, enhance what we're already making and just make it better, for the drinkers. But long-term prospect, I'm excited. And, I should mention cider too. I failed to mention the Angry Orchard cider. We've got a 60 share in the country or something like that, close to that. So we've got, the segments covered, and I'm just excited overall about the prospect of our growth moving forward.
Cool, Matt.
I think any one of us could throw a dart, and you might be right based on what we've seen happen over the last 10 years or so. But I think it's going to be more of the easy drinking occasion, the beer with some type of benefit. And what that benefit means, I don't know, it depends on you, the drinker, but I think there's this convergence of health and wellness combined with a quality, well-crafted beer that's going to persist. And again, that depends on who you are and what you're looking for. But frankly, the New England IPA, in a different mindset, is, kind of fitting that mold. I mean, you can drink it. You can sit back, you can drink it. It's got a little bit higher ABV, perhaps, than the beer that you're used to, but it's right there. So I think you'll see more of that going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Tim and Matt are totally right. And as an R&D brewer, I'm kind of forced to throw that dart at the wall sometimes. And what I'm excited about right now is you got like beer, right? And you got seltzer, and you got cocktails. And it's the space in between, right? So like, where does beer and seltzer overlap, right? That's where I want to go. Where do cocktails and beer overlap? I want to go there, because that's where you have the most potential to grab every stripe of drinker. And so like one of the first things that I'm interested in looking at is how do you, like, I love Pilsner beer, for example. Like, how do you create a Pilsner that does all the things a traditional Pilsner does, but also captures some of the energy that seltzer has, right? Because when you think about them, they're not that different, right? It's like Pilsner was like the 1800s German version of a seltzer, and it rippled across Europe in the same way that seltzer is across the US right now. So to me, it's finding the spaces in between and plugging things into there. That's what I'm excited about.
I love that answer too. And actually, the trend that I was going to call out is actually one I think that I believe Sam Adams started. And the Sam Adams Light in a can, and it's maybe the best beer to play golf with, because at least for me, like all of a sudden holes 3, 4, and 5, I'm feeling really good about my game, and then who knows what happens after that. But that was the first time you saw a really quality brewery make a light beer that was usable in different functions. And now you see like the Swipe Lights and the Rec Leagues, which are fine products. I'm not knocking that at all. I think that once Sam put the beachhead that, hey, it's okay to do this, put this in a can and do that, you start to see that start to proliferate across the industry. So that's something that I think might be coming. My next question for these guys is, I can't wait to hear this answer. What is your favorite song to either drink or make beer to right now? We'll go again. Timmy, Matt, Rich.
Oh, man. Sweet Home Alabama.
Wow, curveball. All right. Yeah, it's a jam, no doubt.
Anything Wu-Tang. I'll go Wu-Tang Triumph.
Ooh,
Classic banger for you right there.
totally.
Mine are going to be different, and I'm not going to say a specific song, but for drinking, it's something off Blonde on Blonde by Dylan. And for brewing, it's something off Jay-Z's first record. So they're really kind of different occasions, I think.
All right. I think what we're going to have to do then is Spatchcock Funk will make a Spotify playlist based off of these inspirations. Because for me right now, because of what we're drinking now, which is a juicy beer, I'm going to go Juicy by Biggie. And I think it ties into Sam Adams too, because Biggie to me, like, it was all a dream. And we start that whole thing out like he was the American dream. Like, I'm going to come from nothing, become a drug dealer, become this great singer. It's awesome. And when I first cracked this beer and I was like, oh, it's a juicy IPA. And then all of a sudden it just kept looping in my head. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. All right. So I love those answers there. How about this? What's your favorite food and beer pairing? You can pick the food, pick the beer. What's your favorite two things to put together?
I'll just use with this beer. I don't even know if I don't think we make it anymore. It was a Rebel Rouser. It was a double IPA.
Yeah.
A
double.
It was that was probably the best one I can remember. Was a hot jambalaya and Rebel Rouser, which I got to put it in better terms though because we don't have the Rebel Rouser. I would say like a New England IPA and like something spicy. Anything spicy. That's the good combination I like.
Love it.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear my kids tearing each other's head off right now, but that's what happens week 8 of COVID here. If not, we'll just edit that out. But listen, Sunday night, I'm watching The Last Dance, and I've got a big IPA and just a wedge of blue cheese and some wheat thins. And for me, that's about as good as it gets. It's pretty simple, but two heavy hitters just going head to head. That flavor explosion that you get from a nice big IPA and some funky salty blue cheese is just sublime.
Yeah, I will have to say I just made a charcuterie board the other night with a couple of cheeses, like a blue cheese.
Yeah.
So that was I'll have to agree with Matt on that one.
Yeah, that's where it's for me from a mile up, it's beer and pizza. But then to distill it down even further, it's beer and cheese. And it's like a nice dry hoppy IPA and like an aged Gouda or like a really kind of hard sharp cheddar. Yeah, or funky blue cheese. Yeah, I'm gonna repeat that answer because it's an important answer.
Love that.
It's so good.
Yep.
That is a great combo. That's not mine, though it's one that I love and enjoy regularly. But for me, it's like if you take a malty taste and then you have a little bit of like the salty, savory thing. Like, so for me, it's a dry chicken wing, like a salt and pepper or like a dry chicken wing with like Old Bay, and then you have like the Oktoberfest, a little bit of malt in it. All of a sudden, like you know when you chicken wings and beer, they're both the type of situation if they're made well, and you're like, I'm only gonna have 6 wings, but you have like a dozen. I'm gonna have 2 beers, but you have 5, right? That's when you know you're in a quality product. So that combination to me is dangerous in the best of ways. Okay, so the next one we got for you too is a this or that. The best hire for assistant brewmaster, Jason Giambi or Alex Rodriguez?
That's like, do you want to get punched in the face, or do you want to have the ball slapped out of your hand in the first base? You're covering first base. I guess if all I'm thinking about is who can like lug 55-pound bags of grain without being a baby about it, I go Giambi on that one.
So
I was gonna say, I want to hear what Rich says first, and then Rich spoke first before I could say that. So sorry, go ahead, Tim.
No, I'm not going to go with either of them. I'm going to go, and I'm a big Yankee fan, so I'm going to go as my utility guy of all time is Randy Velarde. That's who I'm going with as my assistant brewmaster.
Oh, what a curveball on a baseball question. All right, Matt, what were you doing?
I didn't know we could sidestep the question like that.
We can't. That's the first and last time that will ever happen on the show.
With that choice, it's Giambi all day. I'll take the straight shooter, the guy who's going to admit to his his failures, which he will have, versus ARod, who's actually been very good in the booth. I got to say, I got to tip the cap to him. But it's Giambi.
Yeah, ARod's definitely super smart, and he would be useful as an assistant brewmaster in that sense because he'd work hard and do his homework. But Giambi, bro, this guy, like, big, strong guy, which is funny, loves to party. People, like, he is legendary in the baseball community as being a good locker room guy. So, and look, I know that I threw this at you guys for the sole purpose of, especially Rich, knowing he's a Red Sox fan. I'm a Mets fan, so I have no love for the Yankees nor the Red Sox for that matter. But Giambi's one of those guys, Jeter, some of those guys, like David Ortiz, they're different guys. You're like, all right, man, you know what? Like, I don't want to admit it, but I would probably hang out and have a few beers with that guy.
Rich, Ortiz or Manny?
Oh, I mean Ortiz, but they both be fun. And when you say, like, big strong guy, good locker room guy, likes to party, you just described 90% of the brewers I know. So that's why I stick with that.
Okay, so while we're on that note, here's another crazy question. Would you rather, so you're at a brew fest, we've all been there. I'm, as Tim knows, I'm a huge fan of rolling through brew fest, especially towards the end of a really rowdy brew fest. It's like borderline riot level, like it's really fun. So, but a lot of people are wearing the pretzel necklaces to clear their palate before the next beer. So you have to either bite a pretzel off the pretzel necklace from the Tiger King or Carol Baskin. Who are you going with?
I'm going.
This is where I'll choose choice C.
Yeah.
There's no choice C. There's no choice C.
I'd rather bite a pretzel off one of the Tigers, but I'll go Carol Baskin.
Personally, I go Tiger King on this one because, as you can see, he will recognize and see a kindred spirit and hopefully not just shoot me.
Yeah, right.
Try to fight near him.
Yeah, I'm gonna ride or die with Joe Exotic on this one. I listen, Carol Baskin. I don't know what she's capable of. I'm gonna steer clear.
Yeah, I'm with you totally. Joe Exotic's my guy. Which, by the way, what a baller name, Joe Exotic. If you didn't know about this show, and all of a sudden I was like, you guys got to try this new beer that Sam made called Joe Exotic, you'd be like, let's crack that thing. Just a nice name. So, all right, what is, like, who? If you had to pick one celebrity to drink with, who would it be?
Peyton Manning.
Good choice.
I would drink a beer with Eddie Vedder if I had the choice.
I would. I think I would not drink a beer with Peyton Manning. So I'm just gonna say I would still have a beer with Tom Brady despite what's happened.
Despite what's happened, I hear you.
Would you rock the Bucks jersey or the Patriots jersey when you say it with them?
a Patriots jersey. Let's not go too far here, my friend.
Would it be an avocado ice cream beer? Because I don't think he's drinking any regular beers these days.
No, he's not going to do that. That's not even a good answer.
Okay, so let's go into a lightning round. So these guys don't really have the answers to these questions yet. I'm not going to answer them. They are. So the first question is, what is your best experience having a beer at a place you hadn't been to before? Like, give us a name, really quick, like one sentence story. First time you walk. What's that you said, Tim?
Cubby Bear in Chicago.
Ooh, nice. Matt?
Yeah, I mean, listen, for me, it's a Sam Adams at Fenway Park, to be honest with you. And I got to admit it, Yankee fan, but sitting there in Boston, drinking a Boston lager in a historic stadium, I gotta hand it to that particular experience and Fenway there.
Drinking traditional uncarbonated homebrew out of a repurposed Coke bottle with a bunch of Norwegian farmers in the Norwegian countryside who didn't speak English. That's mine.
Okay. Come on. You can't
No,
beat
that's
that.
not
That's
fair.
ridiculous. I was gonna throw in one question to answer, actually, because if one of them was, I had a Sam Adams at a beer across from the Granary gravesite in Boston where Sam Adams is buried, and the guy's like, at the bar, I've been drinking a bunch of beers all day, and I wanted to actually start drinking some liquor. The guy's like, you should have a Sam Adams, because he heard me like rambling on about history. So I'm like, okay, cool, I'll take a Sam Adams, but I've had a bunch of those. He's like, drink one of these and go to the window so you can look at the man's grave while drinking his beer. And I was like, that's kind of baller. So I had a few in his honor. You know what I mean? Okay, that was a pretty great answer. What is the best song about beer?
Oh my gosh. The best song about beer.
There's probably some. Oh, go ahead. No. I was just going to ramble for a minute. I wasn't going to answer the question. If you're ready, go for it.
I was going to say it's got to be one of the I don't know if you guys haven't heard them, just hit YouTube. One of the Narragansett jingles from the 70s. Got to be one of those.
Oh yeah. You know, I wasn't going in that direction, but yeah. So like the Schultz and Dooley from like the Genesee days. That's a good one. That is a good one. The PBR one was good too, but I'll go Schultz and Dooley.
I'm gonna stay on my Pearl Jam train. So, Crazy Mary, they say take a bottle, drink it down. I don't know which bottle it is, but I'm gonna say it's a bottle of Boston Lager, and that's the one I'll go with there.
Crazy Mary. Yeah, that's a good jam, dude. That's a really good jam. Okay, you got to pick New England or Manhattan clam chowder.
New England.
New England all day.
Rich is obviously New England. He was mad I asked the question. I'm also New England. Like I love the city of New York very much. It's a giant part of my life and history, man. New York, but I mean, New England clam chowder is just beyond superior. Okay, so here's one more for you. Would you rather win the World Series or the Super Bowl?
World Series.
World Series.
World Series as well. Yep.
I'm also going to say World Series, but a Super Bowl, I mean, I wouldn't hate it. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be upset about that.
Fan. Of course you wouldn't hate it.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up now, do you guys each have something that you want to tell us about the experience at Sam Adams, like whether it's the beer, the people, whatever it may be? We'll go, again, Tim, Matt, and we'll finish up with Rich. Tell us about something what the Boston Beer Company of Sam Adams means to you and what you want it to mean to others.
I've been here for 12 years. You know, I've gotten to work with Matt, so like we're pretty tight. You know, I've always been in upstate New York. I had a crazy kind of road to get here, but it's by far the most rewarding job I probably could have ever asked for. You're doing something you love every day. You just the amount of passion into the brand that everybody has, the voice that you have that I mentioned earlier, you know, actually means something. And you know, I love the wholesalers. I love working with the wholesaler guys. You know, there's just nothing that can replace those friendships that you've built, you know, within the company and then outside of the company. The fairness, I've had a lot of issues, you know, with in my life with my kids, and everybody's like always been very supportive. I just never felt like an outsider, you know, and I think you can feel that way sometimes in some bigger companies where you just don't have that voice that I mentioned. But we're always doing what we can to get better. We always improve our own selves. I'll use Matt again, like he was a DM and now he's a product trainer and the best at what he does. And I'm just proud of everybody that's worked for me and with me. And, nobody can ever take that away from me. And that's what I'm very happy about. And I have plans on staying here as long as they'll have me. So.
Okay. Thanks, Timmy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I could say here, but the two things that I'll mention are, one, the people and the culture. We at Boston Beer, and then obviously within Sam Adams, I think we hire for, just based on what I've seen, we hire for attitude and we hire for work ethic, and then we train skills. And that's kind of the way that we look at it, is we need an individual that has the core values that jive with ours first and foremost. And then beyond that, we'll train you on what you need to know. And that's my job, part of it. So I can pump the training team a little bit here. But there's one thing, it's the accessibility of too. I mean, listen, nobody takes themselves too seriously here. It's the ability to just hop on your phone and call or text somebody who, is across the country and maybe works in a different department, maybe 3 or 4 levels removed from you in some way, shape, or form. You can do that, which is awesome. And then the second thing I'll say is to be able to stand behind the products that you sell across the whole portfolio, and to be able to sell them and say to a retailer, listen, you can sleep well at night knowing that you carry this product and that you carry this brand. There's nothing like that. There's nothing like that. And I think it's pretty cool, and that Sam Adams name has a cachet, has value, which is, I'm really proud to have the logo on my shirt.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I would say, I was in the industry for over 10 years before I came to Sam. And I always was 2 years here, 3 years here, 2 years here. And I kind of thought that was just the nature of the industry. It might just be the story for a while. And a lot of those places were the kind of places that say things like, oh, we're a family here. And they really want you to feel that. And I never really felt it. So I thought it was always just something that I was going to just kind of not identify with wherever I worked. And then coming to Sam really was a big change, coming to Boston Beer, because not only is it just absolutely full of kindred spirits, I feel like I can be myself, as annoying as that can be to people sometimes. It doesn't seem to be that annoying here, which is great. And then we do this, this is a family kind of thing here, but it's the first place I've ever worked where that has felt genuine and felt reciprocated. And not only am I expected to act as a family member, but the family acts that way back towards me, which I sort of never felt before. So that's why I love it.
Wow, great answer. So the time with y'all has been time well spent. So listen, from the Boston Beer Company and the Sam Adams family to the Spatchcock Funk and Spatchcock Nation family to your family, thank you so much for your time. This has been a great use of our time. Thank you all for being great guests, and we'll see you next episode.